The Jeep shook so hard I thought the frame would crack. Yamada had just bolted a Type 96 anti-aircraft gun to the hood, using nothing but salvaged steel plates and 8-inch bolts he'd pulled from a wrecked landing craft. The Japanese patrol was 300 yards out and closing. I had maybe 90 seconds before they hit our position. The gun wasn't designed for a Jeep. It wasn't designed for anything except shooting down planes. But Yamada looked at me with those steady hands of his and said one word: drive. I was 20 years old, a farm kid from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 4 years working in his uncle's machine shop before the war. And now I was sitting in a canvas seat with a gun that weighed 400 pounds pointed at my windshield and a Japanese-American mechanic telling me to drive straight at an enemy squad. The manual said anti-aircraft guns stay stationary. The manual said Jeeps do reconnaissance. The manual never met Yamada. 3 months earlier, I didn't even know his first name. We shipped out from San Francisco in July 1944, crammed into a transport with 2,000 other guys headed for New Guinea. Most of us were replacements, fresh meat for units that had been chewed up in the Solomon Islands. I was assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division as a motor pool sergeant. My job was keeping vehicles running in a place where everything rusted, melted, or grew fungus within a week. It wasn't glamorous, but Uncle Joe always told me a good mechanic never starves, and he was right about that. Yamada was already there when I arrived. Private First Class Robert Yamada, 5'6", wire-thin, with hands that moved like he was born holding a wrench. The other guys in the motor pool didn't talk to him much. His parents were in Manzanar. His brother was with the 442nd in Italy. He fixed things and kept his head down, and that suited everyone just fine until the afternoon Sergeant Morrison's truck threw a rod in the middle of a supply run, and Yamada rebuilt the entire engine using parts from 3 different vehicles in under 4 hours. Morrison bought him a beer. After that, people started paying attention. We were stationed outside Hollandia, a sprawling mess of tents and supply dumps carved out of jungle that tried to take it back every single night. My unit supported the infantry pushing north along the coast. The Japanese were dug in deep, fighting for every mile, and our guys needed everything from tank repairs to replacing shot-out headlights. The work never stopped. You'd fix a radiator at dawn, patch bullet holes at noon, and be pulling transmission fluid out of mud at midnight. Yamada worked the shift after mine. We'd overlap for an hour each day, trading tools and information, figuring out which parts we could cannibalize and which vehicles were too far gone. He didn't talk much about anything except machinery, but you could tell he was thinking all the time. He'd look at a busted alternator and see solutions nobody else considered. One time, a half-track came in with a seized axle. Standard procedure was to order a replacement and wait 3 weeks. Yamada heated the housing with a blowtorch, packed it with grease mixed with graphite powder he scraped from pencils, and had it rolling again in 6 hours. Major Hendricks heard about it and came down personally to shake his hand. Yamada just nodded and went back to work. The war changed in September. We got orders to support a push toward the Philippines. Intelligence said the Japanese were thinning out, falling back to more defensible positions. Intelligence was wrong. We landed on Morotai Island expecting light resistance and walked into a nightmare. The Japanese had reinforced. They knew we were coming, and they'd positioned machine gun nests in the hills overlooking every approach route. Our landing was supposed to be quick, secure the airfield, establish a perimeter. Instead, we spent 3 days pinned on the beach while Navy guns pounded the jungle and achieved absolutely nothing except killing trees. I lost 2 men in the motor pool that first week. Henderson took shrapnel from a mortar round while retrieving a damaged supply truck. Garcia got hit by sniper fire while we were trying to move a fuel depot. The thing about being a mechanic in a war zone is you think you're safe because you're not infantry. You're behind the lines, supporting the guys who do the real fighting. Then you realize there are no lines. There's just people trying to kill you and people trying not to die, and a wrench doesn't stop bullets any better than a rifle does. Yamada saved my life on the 4th day. We were moving a weapons carrier loaded with mortar shells. The road was supposed to be clear. I was driving, Yamada was in the passenger seat, and we came around a bend to find a Japanese Type 95 tank sitting 40 yards ahead. It wasn't moving. The engine was probably dead, but the gun still worked fine. I froze. I actually froze, hands on the wheel, brain screaming, but my body just locked up. Yamada reached across, grabbed the wheel, and jerked us into the jungle. The tank fired. The shell hit 20 feet behind us. We crashed through undergrowth until the Jeep couldn't go any further. Then we ran. When we got back to camp 2 hours later, covered in mud and leeches, Yamada looked at me and said, "You owe me a beer." I bought him 3. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. After that, we worked different shifts. I don't know if it was official or if we just both decided it made sense to stagger our hours, so the motor pool always had someone experienced on duty. Yamada took nights. I took days. We'd leave notes for each other about what needed fixing, what parts we were short on, which officers were asking for impossible repairs. His handwriting was precise, mechanical. Every letter formed exactly the same way. Mine looked like a chicken had walked through ink. He never commented on it, but sometimes I'd find my notes rewritten in his handwriting on a separate sheet, like he was translating my chaos into something organized. The invasion of Leyte started in October. We were part of the support units landing behind the initial assault. By the time we hit the beach, the infantry had secured a few miles of coastline, but the Japanese were fighting back hard. Kamikaze attacks hit our ships every day. Artillery pounded our positions every night. And the rain never stopped. Everything turned to mud. Engines flooded. Electrical systems shorted. We worked 18-hour days just to keep half the vehicles operational. Yamada worked 20-hour days, and I never saw him complain once. The officers started asking questions. Not about his work. Everyone knew he was the best mechanic in the division, but about his loyalty. Some captain from intelligence showed up one afternoon, asking if Yamada had ever done anything suspicious. Had he ever sabotaged equipment? Had he ever been seen near communication lines? I told the captain that Yamada had saved my life and kept half the division rolling, and if he wanted to question someone's loyalty, maybe he should start with the guys who sat behind desks asking stupid questions. The captain didn't like that answer, but Major Hendricks was there, and he backed me up. The captain left. Yamada pretended he hadn't heard any of it, but that night he left me a note that just said, "Thanks." November brought the worst fighting. The Japanese weren't retreating anymore. They were dug into the mountains, and every position had to be taken with blood. Casualties poured in. The motor pool became a casualty station when the medical tents overflowed. We cleared out vehicles to make room for wounded. Yamada worked through it all, rebuilding engines with one eye on dying soldiers, never showing anything on his face. I asked him once how he did it, how he kept working when everything around us was falling apart. He said, "The vehicles don't care how I feel. They just need to work." It wasn't poetry, but it was honest. The idea started in mid-November. A Japanese patrol had been hitting our supply convoys at night. They'd attack, kill whoever they could, and disappear into the jungle before our guys could respond. The pattern was predictable. They hit the same stretch of road, always between 10 and 11 at night, always when a convoy was vulnerable. Battalion command decided to set an ambush. They'd send a dummy convoy, put infantry in the jungle on both sides, and catch the Japanese in a crossfire. Simple plan, good plan. Except the Japanese commander wasn't stupid. When our convoy came through, nobody attacked. They were watching, waiting for something better. The something better came 3 nights later. A supply column carrying ammunition and medical supplies got hit hard. 8 men killed, 6 wounded, half the supplies destroyed or stolen. The Japanese had waited for something valuable. They'd ambushed it perfectly, and they'd vanished before reinforcements arrived. Major Hendricks was furious. He called a meeting of all unit commanders and senior NCOs. I was there because I was in charge of the motor pool. Yamada wasn't invited because he was enlisted and Japanese, but he heard about it anyway because everyone heard about everything in a camp that small. The major wanted ideas. How do we stop these attacks? The infantry captain said more patrols. The artillery lieutenant said random fire into the jungle. The intelligence officer said better reconnaissance. Everyone had suggestions, all of them variations on what we'd already tried. Then someone mentioned that the Japanese seemed to know exactly when convoys were coming and what they were carrying. Maybe we had a spy. Maybe someone was signaling them. Eyes started turning towards certain people in certain units. I felt my stomach turn because I knew exactly where this was going. I spoke up. I said the problem wasn't intelligence. The problem was predictability. Our convoys ran on schedules. They moved at fixed speeds. They followed the same routes. Of course, the Japanese could plan ambushes. We were giving them everything they needed. What we needed was unpredictability. Fast-moving patrols that could be anywhere, anytime, with enough firepower to hurt them before they could fade away. The major asked what I had in mind. I said I'd need to think about it. What I really needed was to talk to Yamada. I found him after midnight, working on a generator by lamplight. I laid out the problem. The Japanese hit at night. They were mobile. They knew the jungle. We needed something that could move fast, hit hard, and operate independently. Jeeps were fast, but they had no serious weapons. Trucks had space for weapons, but were too slow and too visible. Tanks had firepower, but couldn't navigate jungle terrain. What we needed didn't exist. Yamada listened to all of this, his face showing nothing, his hands never stopping their work on the generator. When I finished, he was quiet for maybe 30 seconds. Then he said, "What about the guns?" The guns. We had a pile of them. Damaged anti-aircraft weapons salvaged from wrecked positions. Type 96s, American M2 Brownings, even a couple of Japanese 20mm cannons pulled from downed planes. They were sitting in a dump behind the motor pool, waiting for someone to either fix them or scrap them for parts. Most were too damaged to mount on their original platforms. But Yamada wasn't thinking about original platforms. He was thinking about jeeps. I told him it was crazy. Anti-aircraft guns weren't designed for ground vehicles. The recoil would tear a jeep apart. The weight would make it impossible to drive. You couldn't aim properly. You couldn't stabilize it. Every regulation said it wouldn't work. Yamada looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "Regulations are written by people who've never been shot at." Then he went back to work on the generator. But I could see his mind was already working on something else. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The next 3 days, Yamada barely slept. He measured. He calculated. He sketched designs on scraps of paper, then crumpled them up and started over. I'd see him staring at a jeep frame for 10 minutes straight, not moving, just thinking. Other guys started noticing. Morrison asked if he was okay. Garcia joked that he'd finally cracked. But I'd seen that look before. That was the look he got right before he solved a problem everyone else thought was impossible. On the 4th day, he showed me the drawings. He'd figured it out. The key was distribution of weight and controlled recoil. You couldn't just bolt a gun to a jeep and expect it to work. You needed a reinforced mounting plate that spread the load across the frame. You needed a hydraulic buffer to absorb recoil. You needed counterweights to prevent the vehicle from flipping. You needed adjustable traversing mechanisms that let you aim without moving the entire jeep. It was complex. It was brilliant. It was completely unauthorized. I took the drawings to Major Hendricks. He looked at them for about 5 minutes without saying anything. Then he looked at me and asked if I thought it would work. I said I didn't know, but Yamada thought it would, and Yamada hadn't been wrong yet. The Major asked how long it would take to build. I said maybe a week if we had the parts and permission to cannibalize damaged equipment. He was quiet again, thinking. Finally he said, "You've got 3 days. If it works, we'll mount them on every Jeep in the division. If it doesn't, you're both back to changing oil filters." He didn't say we'd be court-martialed for unauthorized modifications to military equipment, but we both knew that was on the table too. Yamada didn't sleep for the next 72 hours. I tried to help, but mostly I just handed him tools and stayed out of his way. He started with a Jeep that had rolled over during a convoy and was scheduled to be scrapped. The frame was bent but structurally sound. He cut away everything that wasn't essential. Spare tire, extra seats, storage compartments. Weight was the enemy. Every pound mattered. Then he built the mounting plate, steel salvaged from a damaged landing craft, cut and welded into a platform that bolted directly to the frame at 6 points. The welds had to be perfect. One weak point and the whole thing would tear apart the first time we fired. The gun was a Japanese Type 96. Ironic using their own weapon against them, but it was the only anti-aircraft gun we had that was light enough and still functional. 25mm caliber, gas-operated, capable of firing 200 rounds per minute, designed to shoot down planes at 15,000 feet. Yamada was going to mount it on a Jeep and shoot at people 200 yards away. The manual said maximum depression was 10 degrees. Yamada modified the mount to go to 30 degrees. The manual said it required a 3-man crew. Yamada redesigned it for 1 gunner. The manual said a lot of things. Yamada ignored most of them. The hydraulic buffer was the hardest part. Without it, the recoil would snap the mounting plate clean off the frame. Yamada built it from scratch using parts from 3 different damaged vehicles. A hydraulic cylinder from a bulldozer, springs from a truck suspension, seals from a destroyed half-track. He assembled it, tested it, took it apart, modified it, and tested it again. On the 2nd day, it failed. The cylinder cracked under pressure. Yamada stared at it for maybe an hour, not speaking, barely moving. I thought he might give up. Instead, he went to the supply dump, found a stronger cylinder from a wrecked crane, and started over. Morrison and Garcia helped with the smaller modifications. Reinforced steering to handle the added weight. A modified transmission to provide more low-end torque. Upgraded brakes, because you can't stop a normal Jeep easily, and this wasn't going to be a normal Jeep. We worked through the night, through meals, through air raid sirens. Other mechanics would stop by, watch for a while, and shake their heads. Most thought we were wasting time. A few thought we were crazy. One lieutenant told us to stop because we were destroying military property. Major Hendricks told the lieutenant to shut up and let us work. On the 3rd day, it was done. The gun sat on the hood, angled slightly upward. with a traverse mechanism that let it swing 45 degrees in either direction. The mounting plate looked crude, but solid. The hydraulic buffer was hidden under armor plating welded from damaged helmets. The whole thing looked ridiculous. It looked dangerous. It looked like exactly the kind of improvised insanity that wins wars when everything else fails. Yamada stood back, looked at it for a long time, then said, "We need to test it." The test range was a cleared area behind our perimeter where damaged weapons got fired to see if they still worked. We drove the Jeep out there at dawn before most of the camp was awake. Major Hendricks came along. So did Morrison and Garcia. A couple of infantry guys heard something was happening and showed up to watch. Yamada manned the gun. I drove. We set up 50 yards from a stack of empty fuel drums. The plan was simple. I'd drive slowly forward, Yamada would fire a burst, and we'd see if the Jeep stayed together or flew apart. I put the Jeep in gear, started moving. Yamada tracked the target. I heard him chamber a round. I heard him take a breath. Then he fired. 5 rounds, maybe 2 seconds of trigger time. The sound was incredible. Not just loud. Loud implies volume. This was pressure, physical force that hit you in the chest. The Jeep rocked backward. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. For a second, I thought we'd broken something. Then I looked at the target. All 5 drums were shredded. The mounting plate was intact. The frame was intact. The hydraulic buffer had absorbed the recoil. It had worked. Yamada looked at me. I looked at him. Major Hendricks walked up, examined the Jeep, examined the target, and said, "Build 5 more." Then he walked away. The infantry guys started cheering. Morrison was laughing. Garcia was already sketching modifications for the next version. And Yamada just nodded once, like he'd expected nothing less, and started checking the gun for stress fractures. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Building 5 more wasn't as simple as copying the first. Every Jeep had different damage, different weak points, different specifications. Yamada had to custom fit each mounting plate. We worked in pairs. I'd handle the vehicle modifications while Yamada focused on the gun systems. Morrison and Garcia built the armor plating. We pulled in 2 more mechanics, Johnson and Williams, guys who'd been working truck maintenance and were eager to try something different. Everyone volunteered. Nobody wanted to miss being part of this. The second Jeep was finished in 2 days. The third took 3 days because we had trouble finding a hydraulic cylinder that wasn't cracked. The 4th and 5th went faster because we'd figured out the process. By the end of the second week, we had 6 vehicles, the prototype plus 5 production models. They weren't identical. Each had slight variations based on available parts and specific requirements. 2 had Japanese Type 96 guns, 3 had American M2 Brownings, 1 had a 20mm cannon that Yamada said was technically too powerful, but he'd made it work anyway. We called them gun jeeps. The infantry started calling them hell jeeps. The Japanese would eventually call them something else. Training started immediately. The major picked 12 drivers and 12 gunners. All volunteers, all infantry guys who'd been in combat and knew what they were doing. The idea was to run night patrols along the supply routes where the Japanese had been attacking. Fast-moving, heavily armed, unpredictable. Hit them before they could hit us. The training was simple. Drive fast, shoot straight. Don't stop for anything. One sergeant asked what to do if they encountered a larger force. The major said, "Drive faster." I volunteered to drive one of the patrols. The major asked if I was sure. I was a mechanic, not infantry. I could stay back at camp and keep the jeeps running. That was valuable work. I told him I'd built the damn thing. I wanted to see it work in combat. He approved it. Yamada volunteered as my gunner. The major denied it. Yamada was too valuable. If anything happened to him, nobody else could maintain the guns. Yamada argued. The major refused. They went back and forth for 5 minutes until Yamada just said, "I'll go anyway." The major stared at him, then sighed and said, "Fine, but if you die, I'm putting you on report." We ran our first patrol on November 18th, 1944. 6 gun jeeps, 12 men, heading out at 2100 hours to patrol the coastal road where 3 convoys had been attacked. I drove the lead vehicle. Yamada manned the gun. The plan was to drive the route twice, looking for any sign of Japanese activity. If we found them, we'd engage. If they found us, we'd engage. Either way, somebody was going home with a story. The jungle at night is a different world. Your headlights carve out a tunnel of light through absolute darkness. Everything beyond that tunnel doesn't exist until it's suddenly right in front of you. Sounds echo strangely. Distances are impossible to judge. Your mind fills the darkness with threats that may or may not be real. I'd driven night convoys before, but always with other vehicles, always at slow speeds. This was different. We were moving fast. maybe 30 miles an hour on a dirt road that was barely a road at all. The Jeep bounced over ruts. The gun rattled in its mounting. Yamada braced himself against the frame, one hand on the traverse, one hand on the trigger, eyes scanning the jungle. 20 minutes into the patrol, Yamada raised his fist. "Stop!" I hit the brakes. The other Jeep stopped behind us. Silence. Just the idling engines and the jungle sounds. Insects, birds, things moving in the undergrowth. Yamada pointed left into the trees. I looked. Saw nothing. He pointed again, more insistently. Then I saw it. Movement. Maybe 70 yards in, barely visible. Could have been an animal. Could have been wind in the foliage. Could have been enemy soldiers setting up an ambush. Yamada swung the gun toward the movement and waited. The radio crackled. Morrison in the second Jeep asking if we had a target. I didn't know. I looked at Yamada. He was absolutely still, watching, waiting for more information. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Nothing moved. Yamada lowered the gun slightly and shook his head. False alarm. Maybe. I put the Jeep in gear and we started moving again, but slower now, everyone on edge. We completed the first circuit without contact. Turned around, started back. The second Jeep, driven by Morrison with Garcia on the gun, took the lead. We fell to second position. The plan was to rotate lead vehicles to share the stress of being first. Morrison drove faster than I did, more aggressively, throwing the Jeep into turns and bouncing over obstacles. Garcia loved it. You could see him grinning every time we hit a bump, and the Jeep went airborne for a second. The attack came at 22:47 hours, about 10 miles from camp. Morrison's Jeep rounded a bend, and suddenly tracers were coming from both sides of the road. Japanese machine guns, at least 3 of them, firing from concealed positions. They dug in, camouflaged their positions, and waited for exactly this. Morrison hit the gas. Garcia opened fire, sweeping the gun left to right, 30-round bursts that lit up the jungle. I saw trees exploding, dirt fountaining, tracers crisscrossing in the darkness. Then Morrison's Jeep was through, and it was our turn. I punched the accelerator. Yamada was already firing before we entered the kill zone. He aimed at muzzle flashes, short controlled bursts, methodical even as bullets snapped through the air around us. Something hit the windshield. Didn't penetrate, just starred the glass and kept going. Something else hit the hood with a metallic clang. Yamada kept firing. The Jeep was doing 45 miles an hour. The road was barely a road. I was driving one-handed. The other hand braced against the door, trying to keep us from flipping, while Yamada shredded the jungle with a gun that was never meant to be used this way. Then we were through. Clear of the kill zone. The Jeeps behind us were still engaged, their guns lighting up the night. I slowed, started to turn around. Yamada grabbed my shoulder. "Keep going!" he shouted over the engine noise. "Circle back on the other side." I understood immediately. The Japanese were focused on the road. If we came at them from behind, from the jungle side, we could catch them in a crossfire. I found a gap in the trees, a logging trail or animal path, and drove into the jungle. The ground was soft. The Jeep slewed sideways, wheels spinning in mud, the heavy gun on the front making steering nearly impossible. I fought it, kept moving. Branches scraped the sides. Something heavy hit my helmet. A log, maybe, hanging low. Didn't matter. Kept driving. Yamada was twisted around in his seat, watching behind us, making sure the other Jeeps knew where we'd gone. I could hear the gunfire continuing on the road. Our guys were keeping the Japanese occupied. We had maybe 60 seconds to get in position. The jungle opened into a small clearing. I saw the road ahead, saw the muzzle flashes from the Japanese positions. They were maybe 40 yards away, firing at our Jeeps on the road, completely unaware we were behind them. Yamada swung the gun around. I stopped the Jeep. Yamada started firing before I'd even set the brake. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The Type 96 has a distinctive sound, higher pitched than American guns, faster rate of fire, a kind of tearing noise like fabric ripping. The Japanese soldiers knew that sound. They knew their own weapons. For maybe 2 seconds, they didn't react because they thought it was friendly fire, that one of their own guns had malfunctioned or been redirected. Then they realized the tracers were coming from the wrong direction, and by then, Yamada had already put 50 rounds into their position. The Japanese machine gun nest on the left side of the road just disintegrated. I saw sandbags exploding, equipment flying through the air, muzzle flashes stopping. The other 2 nests turned toward us. That was their mistake. As soon as they stopped firing at the road, the other gun jeeps came back and hit them from the front. We had them in a crossfire. They fought back. I'll give them that. They kept firing even as their positions were torn apart. Somebody put rounds into our engine block. I heard the radiator rupture, saw steam hissing in the headlights. Didn't matter. Yamada kept firing until the gun clicked empty. Silence. Sudden and complete. Just the hissing radiator, the idling engines of the other jeeps, the ringing in my ears. Morrison's voice on the radio, asking if we were okay. I grabbed the handset, said we were fine, engine damage but mobile. Yamada was already reloading, his hands moving automatically, not even looking at the gun. I could see his face in the dashboard lights. Calm, focused, like he'd just finished a repair job, not a firefight. The infantry sergeant from the 3rd Jeep came over on foot, carbine ready to check the Japanese positions. He was back 2 minutes later. 8, confirmed dead. No survivors, no wounded, no prisoners, just 8 soldiers who'd been dug in to ambush our convoys and had gotten ambushed instead. The sergeant looked at our Jeep, looked at the gun, looked at Yamada and said, "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Yamada said, "Duck hunting in California." The sergeant laughed. Then he realized Yamada wasn't joking. We limped back to camp with a blown radiator and 37 bullet holes in our Jeep. The other 5 vehicles were undamaged. 0 casualties on our side. Morrison's Jeep had some close calls. 1 round had gone through his seat backrest, missing him by inches, but everyone was alive and functional. Major Hendricks met us at the motor pool. He didn't say anything at first, just walked around the Jeeps, examining the damage, counting the bullet holes. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Did it work?" I said, "Yes, sir, it worked." He nodded and walked away. That was all the recognition we got, and it was enough. The next morning, Battalion Command asked for a full report. What had we encountered? How had we responded? What were the results? I wrote it up, kept it factual, left out the part where we'd driven into the jungle and attacked from behind because that wasn't exactly standard operating procedure. Major Hendricks read it, crossed out 3 paragraphs, added 2 sentences, and sent it up the chain. 2 days later, we got orders to build 12 more gun jeeps. The concept had been approved. We were now officially part of the division's tactical doctrine. Word spread fast. Other units heard about the gun jeeps and wanted them. We couldn't build them fast enough. The problem was parts. We were already cannibalizing every damaged vehicle and weapon we could find. We needed more guns, more hydraulic systems, more armor plate, more everything. Supply Command said they'd put in a request, but it would take weeks to arrive. Yamada said weeks weren't good enough and started improvising harder. He figured out how to mount 2 guns on a single Jeep. The weight was insane, but he redesigned the suspension and added counterbalances, and somehow it worked. We called them twins. They looked absolutely ridiculous. A Jeep with 2 anti-aircraft guns pointed forward like devil horns. But when both guns fired simultaneously, nothing survived. The Japanese started avoiding areas where the twins operated. We found abandoned positions, equipment still in place, like they just walked away rather than face those guns. December brought rain. Not regular rain, monsoon rain that turned everything into a swamp. The Jeeps bogged down, engines flooded, mud got into the gun mechanisms. We worked around the clock just to keep them operational. Yamada developed a waterproofing technique using salvaged rubber gaskets and grease. It wasn't perfect, but it kept the guns firing. Other mechanics from other units started coming to our motor pool, asking Yamada to teach them his methods. He ran informal classes at night, showing them how to modify their own vehicles. The Major pretended not to notice that Yamada was technically violating about 15 different regulations by training unauthorized personnel in unauthorized modifications. I ran 14 more patrols in December. Most were quiet. We'd drive the routes, see nothing, come back. But 4 times we hit contact. 3 ambushes that we broke up before they could develop. 1 running firefight when we encountered a Japanese patrol and both sides opened fire simultaneously. That one lasted maybe 90 seconds. We destroyed their entire patrol. 12 men, 2 light machine guns, all their equipment. We took damage. Johnson's Jeep caught fire. He and his gunner bailed out, kept fighting with carbines while the Jeep burned. Williams pulled them out under fire, loaded them into his Jeep, and drove them back to camp. The Jeep they'd abandoned burned for 3 hours before the rain finally put it out. The Japanese command knew about us by then. We'd find leaflets in the jungle, propaganda papers dropped from planes or left by infiltrators. Most were standard stuff: surrender appeals, claims that America was losing the war, promises of good treatment for prisoners. But some mentioned the gun jeeps specifically. They called them Hell Dragons or sometimes Devil Cars. One leaflet claimed the vehicles were proof that America was desperate, using suicide tactics and untested weapons. Yamada found that one particularly funny. Untested, he said. We've tested them plenty. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The pattern changed in mid-December. The Japanese stopped setting up static ambush positions. Instead, they started using mobile patrols, small groups that would strike fast and fade away before we could respond. It was smarter. It was harder to counter. We started taking casualties again. A supply convoy got hit, 3 trucks destroyed, 7 men killed. The Japanese were gone before our jeeps could respond. Major Hendricks called another meeting. We needed to adapt. The enemy had adapted to us. Now we had to adapt to them again. Yamada had an idea. The problem was reaction time. By the time we heard about an attack and got our jeeps moving, the Japanese were long gone. What if we didn't wait for attacks? What if we constantly patrolled, running random routes at random times, making ourselves the bait? The major liked it. So did the infantry commander. They authorized continuous patrols, 2 gun jeeps out at all times, 24 hours a day. We'd need more vehicles. We'd need more crews. We'd need more maintenance. Yamada said he could handle it. I believed him. We built 8 more jeeps in 10 days. That brought our total to 26 operational vehicles. We organized them into 13 2-jeep teams, assigned permanent crews, and started running overlapping patrols. One team would head out while another was coming back. There was always someone out there, always guns moving through the territory the Japanese thought they controlled. It was exhausting. Crews were running double shifts. Maintenance was constant, but the attacks on our convoys stopped. The Japanese couldn't predict where we'd be, couldn't set up ambushes, couldn't risk exposing themselves when a gun jeep might come around the corner at any second. We lost our first crew on December 19th, Henderson and Pacheco, running a night patrol near the coast. They drove into an area that had been marked as clear and hit a minefield. The explosion flipped the jeep, detonated their ammunition, and killed them both instantly. We found the wreckage the next morning. The gun was torn in half. The jeep was unrecognizable. We buried them that afternoon, 23 men standing in the rain while a chaplain said words none of us really heard. Yamada stood apart from the group, not crying, not showing anything. After the service, he went straight back to the motor pool and started rebuilding the jeep they'd been driving. I told him he didn't have to do that. We had other vehicles. He could take a break. He said, "They died in my vehicle. I'm going to make sure it works again." It wasn't rational. It wasn't necessary, but I understood. When you build something, when you put your hands and mind into creating a thing that didn't exist before, you feel responsible for it. If it fails, if it kills someone, you carry that. Yamada rebuilt that Jeep in 3 days, made it stronger, made it safer, put better armor on the undercarriage, installed blast deflectors. He couldn't bring Henderson and Pacheco back, but he could make sure the next crew had a better chance. Christmas came. We barely noticed. The war didn't care about holidays. The Japanese didn't care about holidays. We worked straight through. Someone found a scraggly tree and decorated it with strips of aluminum foil and empty bullet casings. Someone else organized a dinner, turkey, and canned vegetables heated over a motor pool forge because the mess tent stove had broken. It was probably the saddest Christmas dinner ever assembled, but we sang some songs and told some jokes and pretended things were normal for about an hour. Then we went back to work. The engagement that would make us famous happened on December 28th, 3 days after Christmas. I was running a patrol with Yamada, paired with Morrison and Garcia in the second Jeep. We were covering the northern sector, an area near the coast where intelligence thought the Japanese were regrouping. The patrol was supposed to be routine, drive the area, show presence, come back. But intelligence had been wrong before, and they were wrong again. We found them at 14:30 hours. Not a patrol, not a small group, a full company, at least 80 men, moving along a coastal trail with equipment and supplies. They were relocating, probably trying to reach a new defensive position before our bombers could hit them. They weren't expecting contact. They weren't prepared for contact. They definitely weren't prepared for 2 gun jeeps to come screaming out of the jungle at 40 miles an hour. Morrison saw them first. He was in the lead. He hit his brakes, spun the jeep sideways to give Garcia a firing angle, and opened up before the Japanese even processed what was happening. I saw the first burst tear through their formation. Men diving for cover, equipment flying, complete chaos. I pulled alongside Morrison, Yamada already firing, both jeeps hitting them from slightly different angles. The Japanese started shooting back, but they were scattered, disorganized, trying to fight vehicles that were moving too fast to track properly. The initial contact lasted maybe 20 seconds. Then we were past them, out of effective range, circling back for another pass. Morrison was on the radio, calling it in, requesting air support, but the nearest planes were 30 minutes away. We had 2 jeeps, 2 guns, maybe 600 rounds of ammunition between us. They had 80 rifles, machine guns, probably mortars. Any sane person would have disengaged, called in artillery, let someone else handle it. Morrison looked at me. I looked at him. We both knew what we were going to do. Second pass was more organized. The Japanese had taken cover, were setting up firing positions. We came at them from a different angle, faster, using terrain to our advantage. Yamada was firing before we were even in range, forcing them to keep their heads down. Morrison swung wide, came at them from the side. Garcia's gun was an M2 Browning, slower rate of fire than Yamada's Type 96, but heavier rounds, better penetration. He was shooting through trees, through cover, hitting positions the Japanese thought were safe. I saw one of their machine gun nests just cease to exist. The gun flipping through the air, the crew scattered. Third pass, they were ready. Somebody had organized a response. As soon as we came around, they opened up with everything. I heard rounds hitting the Jeep frame, the armor plating, the engine block. Heard the windshield shatter. Felt something hot zip past my head close enough to feel the air pressure. Yamada kept firing. I kept driving. Morrison's Jeep was taking hits too. I saw Garcia slump, thought he'd been hit, but he was just reloading, his hands moving mechanically even as bullets snapped around him. Fourth pass, their formation was broken. They weren't a company anymore. They were clusters of men trying to survive, trying to find cover, trying to get away. We should have let them go. Standard doctrine said you don't pursue a retreating enemy into unknown terrain. But Morrison went after them. I followed. We chased them into the jungle, off the trail, through undergrowth that scraped both sides of the Jeeps. Yamada was still firing, shorter bursts now, conserving ammunition. The Japanese were running. Some threw down their weapons. Some kept shooting even as they ran. Some just vanished into the foliage. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. We broke off after maybe 2 miles. The Jeeps couldn't go any deeper into the jungle. We were low on ammunition, and we'd done enough damage. We circled back to the original contact point. The Japanese company was destroyed, equipment abandoned, weapons scattered, bodies everywhere. I've spent 70 years trying not to think too hard about that scene. When you're in combat, in the moment, your mind just processes it as information. Threat eliminated. Mission accomplished. It's later, years later, when you're trying to sleep and your brain decides to replay everything in perfect detail, that it becomes something else. Morrison's Jeep had taken 31 hits. Mine had taken 27. Both were still running. Garcia had a shrapnel cut on his arm. Not serious. Didn't even realize he'd been hit until after we stopped. Yamada had a bruise on his shoulder from the gun's recoil. The hydraulic buffer had started failing during the engagement, was letting more force through. Everything else was mechanical damage. Broken headlights, shattered windshields, shot-out tires, holes in the body. Things we could fix. Things Yamada would fix. Because that's what he did. The air support arrived 15 minutes after we disengaged. 3 P-47s came in low, looking for targets. Morrison radioed them, told them we'd already handled it. The flight leader acknowledged, did a pass over the area to confirm, and headed back. That pilot later told someone in the officers' club that he'd seen maybe 60 Japanese casualties in a quarter-mile area and only 2 Jeeps, and he'd assumed the Jeeps were investigating a bombing site. When he heard what actually happened, he didn't believe it. Nobody did until they saw the after-action report. Command wanted details, exact numbers, exact tactics, exactly how 2 vehicles with 4 men had destroyed an entire company. I wrote it up as accurately as I could, described the engagement from my perspective. Morrison wrote his own report from his perspective. The 2 reports didn't match on several details. Battle is chaos, everybody sees it differently, but the basic facts were consistent. Major Hendricks forwarded both reports up the chain. 3 days later, officers from division headquarters showed up to interview us personally. They talked to me for an hour, they talked to Morrison for an hour, they talked to Garcia, they tried to talk to Yamada. Yamada didn't like talking to officers. He answered their questions politely, briefly, giving them exactly what they asked for and nothing more. They wanted to know how he'd aimed so effectively from a moving vehicle. He said practice. They wanted to know how he'd maintained fire discipline under pressure. He said training. They wanted to know what tactical principles had guided his decisions. He said he just shot at people who were shooting at him. The officers left frustrated. One of them said Yamada was either the best natural gunner he'd ever seen or the luckiest man in the Pacific. Maybe both. The story got into stars and stripes. Gun Jeeps destroy Japanese company. The article quoted Morrison, quoted the division commander, mentioned me in passing. It didn't mention Yamada at all. Not his name, not his role, nothing. Just a division mechanic who'd helped modify the vehicles. I asked Morrison if he'd mentioned Yamada in his interview. He said he'd talked about him for 10 minutes. Garcia said the same thing, but when the story ran, Yamada had been edited out. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was policy. Yamada didn't comment on it. I don't know if he even saw the article.
The division commander came to visit in early January. General Reynolds, a career officer who'd been fighting since North Africa. He toured the motor pool, examined the gun jeeps, talked to the crews.
He asked to meet the mechanic who'd designed the mounting system. Major Hendricks brought Yamada over. The general shook his hand, asked a few technical questions, thanked him for his service. It was brief, formal, professional. The general didn't mention the engagement, didn't mention the company we'd destroyed, didn't mention anything about combat effectiveness. Just thanked Yamada for good engineering work and moved on. I saw something in Yamada's face during that conversation. Not anger, not disappointment. Just a kind of tired understanding that this was how things were and how things would stay. We built 41 gun jeeps by the end of January. Other divisions heard about them and put in requests. Engineers came to study our designs. Yamada spent 3 days teaching a group of officers and mechanics from another unit how to build their own versions. He shared everything: measurements, materials, modifications, lessons learned, asked for nothing in return. One of the officers asked him why he was being so helpful. Yamada said, "Because more of these means fewer of us die." The officer nodded like he understood, but I don't think he really got it. Yamada wasn't talking about American soldiers. He was talking about everyone: the crews, the infantry, the guys who'd benefit from the gun jeeps, even the Japanese soldiers who'd face them. In Yamada's mind, the faster the war ended, the fewer people died, and if his modifications helped end it even one day sooner, that was worth sharing. I ran my last patrol on January 29th. Not because I quit or got reassigned, because I got hit. Stupid accident, really. We were responding to a reported Japanese patrol, found them, engaged them, standard firefight. A round ricocheted off the gun mount, hit the dashboard, fragmented, and pieces ended up in my left leg. Not life-threatening. Not even that serious. But enough that the medics pulled me off combat duty. I spent 2 weeks in the field hospital, then got reassigned to administrative work at division headquarters. Morrison came to visit. Garcia came to visit. Yamada didn't. I found out later he was running triple shifts, trying to cover my maintenance responsibilities on top of his own work. When I finally got back to the motor pool 6 weeks later, I found a note on my old workbench. Just said, "Welcome back. Here's what needs fixing." Attached was a list of 17 vehicles with detailed descriptions of their problems. That was Yamada's way of saying he'd missed me. The Philippines campaign continued through February and March. Our gun jeeps were everywhere by then. Other units had built their own versions, some following Yamada's designs exactly, some making their own modifications. The Japanese adapted. They started laying more mines, setting up better ambush positions, using tactics specifically designed to counter fast-moving vehicles. We lost more crews. Williams and his gunner hit a tree at 40 miles an hour while evading enemy fire. Both survived, but Williams had a broken back and was shipped home. Johnson's Jeep took a direct hit from a mortar. He died instantly. His gunner survived but lost an arm. Every loss hit hard, but we kept going because that's what you do in war. You keep going until you can't anymore, and then someone else keeps going for you. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The war ended in August. We were preparing for the invasion of Japan when the bombs dropped and everything stopped. There was no celebration in our motor pool, just relief. Quiet, exhausted relief that we'd survived and didn't have to keep doing this. Yamada was working on a Jeep when the announcement came over the radio. He finished torquing down a bolt, set his wrench aside, and sat on the ground with his back against the tire. Just sat there for maybe 20 minutes, not moving, not speaking. Then he stood up, picked up his wrench, and went back to work. I asked him if he was okay. He said, "I'll let you know in about 10 years. We shipped home in October. The gun jeeps stayed in the Philippines. Too much trouble to transport them, too much liability to have unauthorized modifications in the peacetime army. They were supposed to be scrapped. I heard later that some got sold to the Philippine government, some ended up with local police forces, some just vanished into private collections. The one I'd driven, the prototype, the first one we'd built, that one got sent to a museum at Fort Benning. I saw it there in 1987, 43 years later, sitting in a display about W12 innovations. It looked smaller than I remembered. The placard next to it mentioned the design had been developed by division mechanics and had proven effective in jungle combat. It didn't mention any names. It definitely didn't mention Yamada. I stayed in touch with Morrison for years after the war. He went back to Texas, worked as a truck driver, raised 4 kids. We'd write letters sometimes, call on holidays. He'd always ask if I'd heard from Yamada. I never had. Nobody had. Garcia tried to find him once, drove to California, checked the address we had from his service records. The house was empty. Neighbors said the family had moved away years ago. No forwarding address, no phone number, nothing. It was like he'd just vanished, like maybe he'd never existed at all, except as a memory in the minds of people who'd worked with him. I tried to write about this a few times over the years. Started a memoir once, got maybe 30 pages in, gave up because I couldn't explain it properly. How do you explain what it was like to work with someone that talented, that dedicated, who got so little recognition? How do you explain building something impossible with salvaged parts in the middle of a war zone? How do you explain the disconnect between what we did and how history remembers it? Words just felt inadequate. I'm 72 now. The war was more than 50 years ago. Most of the people I served with are dead. Morrison passed in 2003, Garcia in 2009. The Major died in the late 90s. I'm one of the last ones left who remember those Jeeps, who remember building them, who remember what they meant. And I'm one of the very few who remember Yamada, who remember exactly how much of the design was his, how much of our success depended on his skill and ingenuity. Here's what I think about most these days. During the war, when everything was immediate and desperate and survival was the only thing that mattered, Yamada's ethnicity was complicated. Some guys couldn't see past it, some guys didn't care. Most fell somewhere in the middle. They knew he was valuable, they knew he was brilliant, but they never quite let themselves forget he was Japanese. Even Morrison, who liked him, who trusted him, would sometimes make comments that showed he saw Yamada as separate, as different. But then we'd go on patrol, and everything would disappear except the mission. In combat, nobody cared about anything except whether you could do your job. Yamada could do his job better than anyone. When the tracers were flying, and the engine was screaming, and we were driving through hell with 80 men trying to kill us, the only thing that mattered was that Yamada could hit targets I couldn't even see, could keep that gun firing when any reasonable person would have given up, could stay calm and focused while everything around us fell apart. In those moments, he wasn't Japanese, he wasn't American, he was just Yamada, and he was the best gunner I'd ever seen. After the war, when we all went home and tried to pretend things were normal again, the contradictions came back. Yamada had helped us win. His innovations had saved American lives, his skill had destroyed enemy units. But his parents were still in a camp. His brother was still fighting for a country that didn't fully accept him. He'd proven himself 100 times over, and it still wasn't enough for some people. I think about that a lot. I think about what we asked of him. To risk his life for a country that questioned his loyalty, and how he did it anyway. Not because he was trying to prove anything, but because it was the right thing to do. The gun jeeps worked because Yamada understood something fundamental about warfare that a lot of educated officers never grasped. You can't win by following the manual. The manual tells you what's supposed to work in ideal conditions. War is never ideal. You win by adapting, by taking what you have and making it into what you need, by ignoring the rules when the rules don't make sense. Yamada looked at anti-aircraft guns and jeeps, and instead of seeing incompatible systems, he saw a solution. He saw a way to give us mobility and firepower simultaneously, to make us dangerous instead of vulnerable. That kind of thinking doesn't come from training. It comes from intelligence and creativity and a willingness to try things that everyone says won't work. I've thought a lot over the years about why the gun jeeps aren't better known. They weren't secret. We used them openly, wrote about them in reports, even got press coverage. But somehow they've mostly been forgotten. Maybe it's because they were improvised, unofficial, not part of any formal doctrine. Maybe it's because the war in the Pacific gets less attention than the European theater. Maybe it's because nobody wants to talk about how much we depended on innovations from someone the military brass didn't fully trust. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe history just forgets most things. The big battles get remembered. The generals get remembered. The dramatic moments get remembered. But the day-to-day reality of war, the 1,000 small innovations and adaptations that keep an army functioning, that stuff disappears. And the people responsible for it, the mechanics and engineers and supply sergeants who make everything work, they disappear too. They go home, go back to normal life, and nobody asks them about the time they built guns on jeeps and changed how their unit fought. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I tried one more time to find Yamada in 1995. I hired a researcher, gave them everything I knew, his full name, his service number, his hometown, his unit. They searched for 6 months, found his discharge papers, found records showing his parents had been released from Manzanar in 1945. Found a marriage license from 1947 in Sacramento. Then the trail went cold. No death certificate, no current address, no phone listing, nothing. Either he'd changed his name, or he deliberately made himself unfindable. I understood why he might do that. After everything he'd been through, maybe he just wanted to disappear, to be left alone, to not be defined by the war or his service or his ethnicity. But I wish I could have found him. I wish I could have talked to him one more time. Asked him questions I never thought to ask when we were 20. Did he ever think about the Jeeps? Did he ever regret building them? Did he carry the same weight I carried? The knowledge that our innovations had killed people, that our ingenuity had made us more effective at destroying human lives? Or did he see it differently, as a pure engineering problem solved elegantly under pressure? I never got to ask those questions. I never got to tell him that I thought about him every time I fixed something, every time I had to improvise a solution, every time I had to figure out how to make incompatible systems work together. His way of thinking, methodical, creative, unbound by convention, that influenced how I approach problems for the rest of my life. I became a mechanic after the war, ran my own shop for 30 years. Every time I solved something nobody else could figure out, I'd think. That's how Yamada would have done it. The Japanese called our gun jeeps Dragon of Hell, or sometimes Devil Dragon. The exact translation varies depending on who you ask, but the name stuck. Japanese veterans after the war, the ones who survived our patrols, they remembered those vehicles. They remembered the sound, 2 or 3 guns firing simultaneously, the specific cadence that meant a gun jeep was close. They remembered the terror of encountering them at night, seeing tracers coming from multiple directions, not knowing how many vehicles there were or where they'd come from. Some of them wrote memoirs. In those memoirs, they mentioned the Dragon of Hell more than they mentioned tanks or planes or artillery. That should tell you something about how effective they were, how much psychological impact they had. What they didn't know, what nobody knew except us, was that the Dragon of Hell was designed by a Japanese American who'd never be properly credited for it. There's an irony there that I've never quite been able to process. The weapons that terrified Japanese soldiers, that helped us win engagements and save American lives, were created by someone who shared their ancestry. Someone who was fighting against them not out of hatred, but out of duty, out of a desire to end the war, out of a belief that the fastest way to stop the killing was to be better at fighting than the other side was. I don't know if Yamada thought about that irony. We never discussed it. In 1945, you didn't have those kinds of conversations. You focused on surviving, on doing your job, on getting through each day. The philosophical implications, the moral complexities, those came later, in quiet moments when you were trying to sleep and your brain wouldn't shut down. I've had a lot of those moments over 70 years. I suspect Yamada did too. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about war when you're 19 and signing up because it seems like the right thing to do. They tell you about courage and sacrifice and duty. They tell you about defending your country and stopping evil. They tell you you'll come home a hero, that you'll have proven yourself, that you'll have done something meaningful. All of that is partially true, but what they don't tell you is that you'll also come home carrying things you never wanted, knowing things you wish you didn't know, remembering things you can't forget. I remember building the first gun jeep with Yamada.